Book of Heaven, Volume 16, Part 7. December 4th, 1923. Luisa does not want to be known. Jesus speaks of the necessity of this knowledge. I was thinking about what I am writing on the most holy will of my sweet Jesus. The fact that blessed Jesus wants to say many sublime things about his holy will is right, because anything that can be said about it, its height, greatness, prodigies, and so forth, is all good. Even more, everything is little compared to what could be said. But that continuous braiding this poor soul of mine with it, this should not be there. His will is what he should make known, not me. My poor person should not exist. More so, since the whole thing is his own, not mine. For me there is nothing left but the confusion of what he tells me. But in spite of this, obedience forces me to write, not only about the divine will, but also about the braiding he makes between me and his will. Now, while I was thinking about this, my sweet Jesus came out from within my interior, and squeezing me to himself, told me, "My daughter, you are always my newborn of my will. And besides, you are wrong. You want me to speak about my will and to make it known, and the one who must be the channel, the spokesperson, the instrument to make it known, should not exist. If this were to remain between you and me, maybe it could work. But since I want my will to have its kingdom, and the kingdom is not formed of one person alone, but of many people, and people of different conditions, it is therefore necessary that not only my will, the goods it contains, the nobility of those who shall want to live in this kingdom, the good, the happiness, the order, the harmony that each one shall possess, be known, but also the one whom my goodness has chosen as origin and beginning of such a great good. Braiding you together with my will, raising you above all things of creation, means nothing other than giving more importance to my will, raising it higher, giving it more weight. The more good, the holier, the richer, the more generous a king is, and the more he loves his subjects, to the point of laying down his own life, rather than allowing the one who lives in his kingdom to be touched, the more esteemed and loved that kingdom is. And this arouses in all the desire to live in that kingdom. Even more, they compete with each other to see who might get such a fortune. Therefore, the good functioning of the kingdom and its importance derive from the knowledge of the king. By saying that you do not want to be braided with my will, you would want the kingdom without king, the science without the master, the possessions without the owner. What would happen to this kingdom, to this science, to these possessions? How many disorders, how much ruin would not occur? And I do not know how to do disordered things. On the contrary, the first thing in me is order. See, this would have happened in redemption if my dear mamma had not wanted to make known that she was my mother, that she had conceived me in her virginal womb, and that she nourished me with her milk. My coming upon earth, Redemption would give of the incredible, and no one would have been moved to believe and to take the goods contained in redemption. On the other hand, because my mother made known who she was, she who is exempt from every stain, also of origin, a prodigy of grace, and how she loved all creatures as tender children, and for love of them she sacrificed the life of her Son and God. Redemption received greater importance, became more accessible to the human mind, and formed the kingdom of redemption with its copious effects. So, braiding my mother with the work of redemption was nothing other than giving more importance to the great good that I came to do upon earth. Having to be visible to all, taking on human flesh, I had to use a creature from the human race, whom I had to exalt above all in order to accomplish my high designs. Now, if this happened in order to form the kingdom of my redemption upon earth, in the same way, having to form the kingdom of my will, it is necessary that another creature be known, in whom the true reigning of my will must have its origin and beginning. Who she is, how much I have loved her, how I have sacrificed her for all and for each one. In a word, everything that my will has disposed and poured into her. But by braiding you with it, it is always my will that stands out. These are ways and means in order to make it known. These are attractions, spurs, lights, magnets, in order to draw everyone to come to live in this kingdom of happiness, of grace, of peace, of love. Therefore let your Jesus do, who loves you very much, and do not want to afflict yourself, and even less worry about the way I carry out the braiding of my will with you. Think only about continuing your flight in the eternal expanses of my supreme volition. December 6, 1923. Jesus flings the soul in flight within the immensity of his will. The commitment of the Most Holy Virgin, the commitment of Jesus, and the commitment of Luisa for the coming of the kingdom of the divine will upon earth. Difference between the sanctity in the divine will and that of virtues. I was praying, and my sweet Jesus made himself seen in my interior, with his gaze fixed on me. And I, drawn by his gaze, looked at him deep into his interior, that seemed to be like a crystal, in which one could see all that my beloved Jesus was doing. And uniting myself with him, I tried to do what he was doing. At other times it seemed to me that Jesus would take my soul in his hands and would fling it in flight within the immensity of his will, telling me, "The newborn of my will, you were born in my will. In it do I want you to live. Fly, fly in the eternal volition, fulfill your office. See what needs to be done between the divinity and the creatures. Make your round through all generations, but always in my will. Otherwise you shall not find them all. And loving, operating, repairing, adoring for all, you shall bring yourself before the Supreme Majesty to give to it all the love and the homages of all and of each one, as the true firstborn daughter of our will. I would take flight, and Jesus would follow my flight with his gaze. But who can say what I would do? In his will, I could find all the love that his will was to give to the creatures. And because they would not take it, it was suspended, waiting to be taken. And I would make it my own, and investing all created intelligences, I would form for each thought an act of love, of adoration, and of all that each intelligence was supposed to give God. And embracing everything within myself, as though placing everyone on my lap, I would set off for heaven, to place them on the lap of the Celestial Father, saying to him, Holy Father, I come to your throne to bring you on my lap all your children, your dear images created by you, in order to place them on your divine lap again, that you may bind and tie once again that will that they had broken between you and them. It is the little daughter of your will who asks this of you. I am little, it is true, but I take on the commitment to satisfy you for all. I shall not depart from your throne if you do not bind the human will with the divine, so that as I take it to earth, the kingdom of your will may come upon earth. Nothing is denied to the little ones, because what they ask is nothing other than the echo of your own will and of what you yourself want. Then I would bring myself to Jesus, who was waiting for me in my little room, and he would receive me in his arms, covering me with kisses and caresses, telling me, My little one, in order for the will of heaven to descend upon earth, it is necessary that all human acts be sealed and glazed with acts of divine will, so that, in seeing that all the acts of creatures are smothered with its will, drawn by the powerful magnet of its own volition, the supreme will may descend upon earth and reign on it. To you, then, as firstborn daughter of our will, is this task given. Know that in order to draw the word from heaven, my mamma took on this commitment of making her round through all generations, and making all the acts of human will her own. She placed the divine will in them, since she possessed so much of this capital of the supreme volition as to surpass everything that all creatures together would possess. And for each round she did, she multiplied this capital. So in seeing that one of our most faithful creatures had smothered with so much grace and love all the human acts with the divine will, taking to heart what was needed in order to do this, and in seeing that our will was present in the world, I, eternal Word, drawn, descended from heaven. The second commitment befitted me in order to form the redemption. How much I had to make my round through all human acts, taking them all as though in my hand, and covering them, sealing them, glazing them with my divine will, in order to draw my celestial Father to look at all the human acts covered with that divine will, which man had rejected, into the celestial regions, so that my divine Father might open the doors of heaven that had been closed by the human will. There is no good that descends, if not by means of my will. The third one is yours. It befits you, as firstborn daughter of our will, to add the third seal of our will upon all human acts to the first and the second, in order to draw the kingdom of my will to come upon earth. Therefore make your round, my daughter, over all the human acts of creatures. Penetrate even into the hearts. Bring to each heartbeat the heartbeat of my will, to each thought the kiss, the knowledge of my will. Impress in each word the omnipotent Fiat. Invade everything. Overwhelm everyone into it, that my kingdom may come upon earth. Your Jesus shall not leave you alone in these rounds. I shall assist you and guide you in everything. And while he was saying this, I continued my flight, making my round through everything and everyone. But who can say what I would do? Jesus alone can say it, who made me do it. So I spent a night always with Jesus, and while making my round, I would bring him now all thoughts, now all words, now all works, steps, heartbeats, invested by his will. And Jesus would receive everything with love and would make feast. Then he said to me, "Do you see what great difference exists between the sanctity in my will and that of the other virtues? The first one is for the creature to receive currents of grace, of light, of love in every instant, and to remain in order with her Creator in each of her acts. Therefore it is the sanctity closest to her Creator. The second, that of the other virtues, exists at time and circumstance, whenever the occasion arises to exercise now patience, now obedience, now charity, and the like. And if the occasions do not arise, the virtues remain interrupted and without growth, and cannot receive the good that the virtue in act contains. On the other hand, in the sanctity of my will, there are no stops or interruptions. My will is always fixed on darting through the creature. She can receive it in every instant. Whether she breathes, thinks, speaks, palpitates, takes food, or sleeps, everything enters into my volition, and in every instant she can be filled with my will, together with all the goods it contains. December 8th, 1923, on the Immaculate Conception of the Virgin. How she was conceived in the merits, works, and pains of the incarnate Word, to be able to have the virtue of conceiving that Word, who was to come to redeem mankind. All the evil is in the will of man, not in his nature. I was thinking about the Immaculate Conception of my Queen Mamma, and after I received Holy Communion, my always lovable Jesus made himself seen in my interior as though inside a room that was all light. In this light, he showed everything he had done during the course of his life. One could see, lined up in order, all his merits, his works, his pains, his wounds, his blood, everything that the life of a man and God contained, as though in the act of preserving a soul so very dear to him from the slightest evil that could possibly shadow her. I was amazed at seeing so much attention of Jesus, and he said to me, To my little newborn, I want to make known the Immaculate Conception of the Virgin, conceived without sin. First, you must know that my divinity is one single act. All acts concentrate into a single one. This is what it means to be God, the greatest portent of our divine essence, not to be subject to succession of acts. And if to the creature it seems that we do now something and now something else, it is rather that we make known what is present in that single act. In fact, since the creature is incapable of knowing it all at once, we make it known little by little. Now, everything that I, Eternal Word, was to do in my assumed humanity formed one single act with that single act that my divinity contains. Therefore, before this noble creature was conceived, everything that the Eternal Word was to do upon earth already existed. And so, in the act in which this virgin was conceived, all my merits, all my pains, my blood, everything that the life of a man and God contained, lined up around her conception. And she was conceived in the endless abysses of my merits, of my divine blood, and in the immense sea of my pains. By virtue of them, she remained immaculate, beautiful, and pure. My incalculable merits barred the enemy's way, and he could do no harm to her. It was right that the one who was to conceive the Son of a God be first conceived in the works of this God, to be able to have the virtue of conceiving that Word who was to come to redeem mankind. So first she was conceived in me, and then I was conceived in her. There was nothing left but to make it known to creatures at the appropriate time. But in the divinity, it was as though already done. Therefore, the one who most gathered the fruits of redemption, or rather, who received its complete fruit, was this excelling creature. Having been conceived in it, she loved, esteemed, and kept as her own everything that the Son of God did upon earth. Oh, the beauty of this tender little one! She was a prodigy of grace, a portent of our divinity. She grew up as our daughter. She was our decorum, our joy, our honor, and our glory. While my sweet Jesus was saying this, I was thinking in my mind, it is true that the Queen Mamma was conceived in the endless merits of my Jesus, but her blood, her body, were conceived in the womb of Saint Anne, who was not exempt from original sin. So how can it be that she inherited nothing of the many evils that we all have inherited from the sin of our first father Adam? And Jesus, my daughter, you have not yet understood that all evil is in the will. It was the will that confounded man. That is his nature. It was not his nature that confounded the will of man. His nature remained at its place, just as it was created by me. Nothing changed. It was his will that changed. It put itself against no less than a divine will, and this rebellious will confounded his nature, debilitated it, contaminated it, and rendered it a slave to most vile passions. It happened as to a container full of perfumes or of precious things. If it is emptied of those, and then filled with rot or with vile things, does the container perhaps change? What is placed inside of it changes, but the container is always the same. At the most, it becomes more or less estimable, depending on what it contains. Such was man. Now, being conceived in a creature from the human race did no harm to my mamma, because her soul was immune to any sin. There was no division between her will and that of her God. The divine currents found no obstacle or opposition in pouring themselves upon her. In every instant, she was under the pouring rain of new graces. So, with this will and this soul, all holy, all pure, all beautiful, the container of her body that she received from her mother remained fragrant, rehabilitated, ordered, divinized, in such a way as to remain exempt also from all the natural maladies by which the human nature is invaded. Ah, she was precisely she who received the seed of the Fiat Voluntas Tua on earth as it was in heaven, that ennobled her and restored her to her origin, as man was created by us before he sinned. Even more, she surpassed it. She was embellished even more through the continuous flows of that fiat, which alone has the virtue of reproducing images fully similar to he who created them. And by virtue of this divine will that acted in her, it can be said that what God is by nature, she is by grace. Our will can do anything and reach anywhere when the soul gives us the freedom to act and does not interrupt our work with her own will. December 26, 1923. For the one who lives in the divine will, it is always Christmas. The continuous dying of Jesus, and the continuous dying of Luisa in the divine will. I went through most bitter days because of the privation of my sweet Jesus. I felt like a most wretched rag that Jesus had put aside because it was disgusting to him, so dirty it was. And in my interior I heard being said to me, "In my will there are no rags, but everything is life, and divine life. A rag is torn, it becomes dirty, but it does not contain life, while in my will that contains life and gives life to everything, there is no danger that the soul may be torn to pieces, or even less get dirty." Not paying attention to this, I thought to myself, what beautiful Christmas holidays is Jesus making me spend? It shows how he loves me. And he, moving in my interior, added, "My daughter, for the one who does my will, it is always Christmas. As the soul enters my will, I am conceived in her act. As she goes on performing her act, I carry out my life. As she completes it, I rise again, and the soul remains conceived in me, carries out her life in mine, and rises again in my own acts. See then how Christmas holidays are for those who prepare themselves and place themselves in my grace once a year, and so they feel something new about my birth within themselves. But for the one who does my will, it is always Christmas. I am born again in each one of her acts. So would you want me to be born in you once a year? No, no, for the one who does my will, my birth, my life, my death, and my resurrection must be a continuous act, never interrupted. Otherwise, what would be the difference, the immeasurable distance from the other sanctities? On hearing this, I felt more embittered, and I thought to myself, how much fantasy! This hearing is nothing other than a most subtle pride of mine. Only my pride could suggest this to me, and reach the point of making me write so many things on the will of God. The others are good, humble, and this is why no one has ever dared to write anything. And while I was thinking of this, I felt such pain as to feel my heart break, and I tried to distract myself so as not to feel anything. What a terrible struggle, to the point of feeling myself dying. And then, while I was in this state, my beloved Jesus made himself seen, as though wanting to say more about his most holy will. And I, my Jesus, help me. Don't you see how much pride there is in me? Have pity on me. Free me from this subtle pride. I don't want to know anything. It is enough for me to love you. And Jesus, my daughter, crosses, sorrows, pains are like a press for the soul. Just as the winepress serves to crush and peel the grapes in such a way that the wine remains on one side and the skin on the other, in the same way, crosses and pains, like a press, peel the soul of pride, of love of self, of passions, and of all that is human, leaving the pure wine of virtues. And so my virtues find the way to communicate themselves and lay themselves within the soul as on a snow-white canvas, with indelible characters. How can you fear, then, if every time I have manifested to you my truths on my will, these truths have always been preceded by crosses, sorrows, and pains? And the higher the truths, the more intense and the stronger the pains? It was nothing other than the pressure of the press that I exercised in you, in order to peel you of all that is human. It was my interest more than yours that these truths would not be mixed with the skin of human passions. And I, my Jesus, forgive me if I am telling you this, but you, yourself, are the cause of my fears. If you did not leave me, if you did not hide and deprive me of you, there would be no place in me to let these fears arise. Ah, Jesus, you make me die, but of a cruel death, and double death, because I do not die. Oh, if only I could experience death and die, how sweet it would be for me. Oh, Jesus, I am telling you, I can bear no more. Either you take me with you, or you remain with me. Now, while I was saying this, my lovable Jesus clasped me in his arms, and it was as if he was winding something with his hands. and I was put as though under a press, pressed, crushed. I myself am unable to tell the pain I felt within me. He alone knows what he made me suffer. Then afterwards he told me, "Beloved daughter of my will, look inside of me, how my supreme will conceded not even a breath of life to the will of my humanity. As holy as it was, not even that was conceded to me. I was to remain under the pressure of a divine, infinite, endless will, more than a press, that constituted itself life of each one of my heartbeats, words, and acts. And my little human will died in each heartbeat, breath, act, word, and so forth. But it died in reality. It actually felt death, because it never had life. I had my human will only to make it die continuously, and even though this was a great honor for my humanity, and the greatest of portents, each death of my human will was substituted by a life of divine will. However, this continuous dying was the greatest, the hardest, the most bitter and painful martyrdom of my humanity. Oh, how the pains of my passion became little before this continuous dying of mine! And in this alone I completed the perfect glory of my celestial Father, and I loved him with a love that surpasses any other love for all creatures. To die, to suffer, to do something great a few times, at intervals, is not so great. The saints, the good, and other creatures also have worked, have suffered, have died. But since it was not a continuous suffering, doing, and dying, it constitutes neither a perfect glory to the Father, nor a redemption that can be extended to all. Therefore, my newborn daughter and my eternal volition, see now where your Jesus calls you and wants you, under the press of my divine will, so that your will may receive continuous death, just as my human will did. Otherwise I could not make the new era arise, in which my will may come to reign upon earth. It takes the continuous act, pains, deaths, in order to be able to snatch the Fiat Voluntas Tua from heaven. Beware, my daughter. Do not look at others, either at my other saints, or at the way I conducted myself with them, that causes you to be surprised at the way I behave with you. With them I wanted to do one thing. With you it is something completely different. And as he was saying this, he took the form of the crucified, and he leaned his forehead on mine, laying himself over my whole person. And I remained under his pressure, and all prey to his will. You have reached the end of the Book of Heaven, Volume 16, Part 7. Fiat.